chat and not starting the live. So there we go. I was saying hi to everyone in the chat, and the live should have started. So we are going to talk this morning about two different things. One is, are rental properties worth it? That's what we're going to look at today. And the second thing is, how do you get started with buying your first rental? Because a lot of people don't go into rental real estate as an investment because they keep trying to figure out the perfect way to start. And there is no perfect way to start in rental property real estate. The conditions will never be perfect, but we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do, and I will admit that I didn't do. So we'll talk about my mistakes and what you shouldn't do. I did the best I could way back when, and we're talking well over 20 to 25 years ago, with no internet and no knowledge, really, of, how to do these things. And so we didn't have YouTube videos and all the experts that you have today that can tell you, well, look at population growth and look at these statistics and all of these different data sets, right? It's really a lot more simple than that. However, sophisticated investors look at a ton of data sets and say, here's the place where I want to invest. Well, I'm getting to that point where I could look at, here are the places where I want to invest. And I'll give you an example real quick before we even get into this. Is you can buy a turnkey property, meaning a property that's already been fixed up, it already has a renter in it, from a company in Memphis, Tennessee. So you can go into rental property real estate without doing any of the work yourself. Let's just say that you live in a very high expense area of the country. California, Washington State, and Seattle is a very high expense area. If you live there, you might say to yourself, well, I'm trying to start out in real estate, but I can't afford anything here where I live. A lot of people invest out of state. Again, Memphis, Tennessee. A friend of mine in Virginia, he's in a high expense area. He invests in Memphis, Tennessee. So there is that. However, some people are not comfortable investing away from where they live. And so my point is, you have to do what works best for you. That's the short version of all of this. I can tell you what I did, which is I was in a very small town, actually the smallest city in America, Virgins, Vermont. That's where I lived when I bought my first real estate, my first rental properties. And that town is 1 mile square. So look it up. Virgins, Vermont is the smallest city in America. It's exactly 1 mile square. And so that's what they claim. And so anyway, that's where I started. So I bought in my own backyard in a 1 mile square city. Wherever you live, you may have a much bigger city, and so your criteria might be different. Let me look over here at the chat. Hi, Tiff. Tiff's Take is here. Homebody Trish is here. Thank you, Trish, for coming by. Pause and Planola is here. Christiana, I was just on her live just before this live at Well Behaved Wallet. So she is going to be more consistent, and she is doing a course in how to become a certified financial educator. I may have messed that up, but I got pretty close. And she mentioned that live, or that course, on her live before, and I went and I looked it up. And I'm debating taking that course as well to become a certified financial educator. And so I'm going off my topic, but I wanted to, give credit to some folks in the chat and say hello. Oki from Oki's Eden is here. Thank you, Oki, for coming by. And so Christiana is telling me to take the course. I'm debating it because And we're going to get back to the topic, but I just yesterday had one of my classes cancel that was supposed to start next week. So right now I am down to 2 classes, which is really easy. I've had as many as 10 classes going on at one time. So this is very, very easy and a light semester for me, is 2 classes. So I really could take the financial educator course while teaching 2 classes. Certified financial educator. So I'm looking at that. But what I'm going to make sure that I talk about today, and I need to move my screen around a little bit, as normal, I was not 100% prepared when I turned on the live. And so, anyway, so what we're talking about here today is rental property worth it? And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because I have had, as you guys saw in my end of month budget recap, I've had a lot of things go on with my rental properties. Now, what happens is typically all of these things happen, but they don't all happen in the course of 2 to 3 months. But I have had, like when it rains, it pours. I have had a lot of the normal rental property owner items all happen in a very concentrated time frame, which caused me to do some investigation about, are rental properties worth it? And so if you own rental properties, and the more properties you own, the more different things you can run into. But as you own rental properties, different things are going to happen. You're going to have evictions. You're going to have tenants who don't pay. You're going to have property maintenance. For example, we're in the middle of summer and AC units are having a lot of stress because the weather is hot. This is all normal items. However, when you have a bunch of these items, and I have more than 10 rental properties, so when you have a bunch of these items all happen at the same time, and you are trying to get out of debt, the money that you would put towards paying down debt, now I'm making the minimum payments, but the money that you would put towards paying down the debt now has to get diverted into covering these rental property expenses. And you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to have enough rental income coming in to cover all of these rental property expenses? That's a perfect world. The world is not perfect. Everyone does not have $100,000 sitting in cash to cover every single rental property expense. Some people do, but many people are just going not month to month. They're making a small profit, but it does not cover a bunch of catastrophes that all happen in a very short amount of time. So what did I do? I mentioned that I had a house catch on fire, one of my rental properties. Well, the insurance company is still going through trying to figure out whether it's a total loss or how much it's going to cost to get it fixed up, all those different things. I've never had a fire before. So this is a first for me. And you're going to have a lot of first items as a rental property owner. My issue is that I had a bunch of items happen. I had a renter who we were evicting that filed bankruptcy. Never seen that before. No one in my little town here has ever seen that before. So we had to hire an attorney from Birmingham, Alabama, the big city, who has dealt with an eviction along with a bankruptcy. So now think about this. I have a tenant not paying. They filed bankruptcy, and now not only am I not getting the rental income, they're still in my rental, and I have to pay an attorney from the big city to deal with how do we get them out of the rental. So all of these different things are happening. And then I have other units that are becoming vacant this month where we have to fix them up in order to get them ready to rent again. So a lot of things happening in a concentrated period of time. What this did was it caused me to look at my different sources of income and where could I obtain more cash from in a short amount of time. And as I mentioned at my end of month video, is I found out through all of these circumstances that I can become my own bank, which is a beautiful thing. So why would I pay a bank interest when I can pay myself the interest? That's the beautiful thing that comes out of some disasters. And so that's what I wanted to share. So let's get back to, not only are rental properties worth it, and I'm going to try and look over at the chat from time to time and see. And thank you, Pause and Plainola. He said, everyone please hit the like button and share out the live. Thank you. Yes, Christiana, it came as a shock to me because I've just never gone through a rental property fire. Luckily, I need to make sure I say this, no one was hurt. And I don't know the exact cause. I've heard some speculation, but I have not talked to like the fire inspector or the insurance adjuster who has talked to the fire inspector. So I really don't know everything, but I'm waiting. And my property management company is handling all of this. So this is one other thing about owning rental properties. You have to decide, and we're going to go through this as we go through the different things of buying your first rental. You have to decide, do you actively want to manage it? Yes, you can save 10% of your rental income by managing it yourself, but do you want the stress of working, let's say, a full-time job and the time it takes to manage a rental property? I will tell you, I did that in the beginning. I managed my own rental. I lived in a duplex in Vermont, and I managed it. So when I left Vermont and I moved to Miami, I still managed that duplex remotely. So from Miami to Vermont, I'm trying to manage a property, my very first rental, and I had no clue about property management. I had no clue about how to screen for the best tenants. I was always in a financial bind with that property, so I would just take the first tenant that had the deposit. Major mistake, I realize that, okay? We're talking hindsight now. However, you cannot always afford to keep it empty. So sometimes, especially when you only have one rental property, everything is a critical decision. You know, can I afford to make the mortgage payments if I keep it empty? The more rental properties you get, which is why I say that you should always have more than one or more than two, the more properties you get, it's not as bad a financial hit. So most of the time, except for these recent months, most of the time, most of my rentals will cover any financial hit that comes up that month. Whether it's an AC unit, whether it's a tenant not paying, the other rentals cover that. Well, this time we had a whole bunch of things happen in one short amount of time where all the different rentals can't cover that. And so here's a spoiler alert. What happened a couple months ago was I was $14 short. Then what happened last month was I had no rental profitable income at all. This month, I'm looking at a $5,000 shortfall. That's what I'm saying. All of these things have been building over the last few months, and I knew that August was coming. I could see it from the numbers and from all of the expenses. You know, I've had roof repairs. I've had all kinds of things happen just in a very short amount of time. And I kept saying, next month it's going to be worse. Next month it's going to be worse. Well, I found the money to cover all these things from my own resources, which is in my video. So go watch my end of July video. Okay, so that part, not a problem. I also ran a ChatGPT script where I put in all of my monthly statements for the last 6 years that I've had most of my rental properties. And I'll get to some really good news. This isn't all about, how my life is a current train wreck. But I went through and I had ChatGPT tell me which properties were most profitable and which properties were my biggest hassles. Because the properties that I own, the issue is monthly maintenance. I have older rental properties, and if you have newer rental properties, you have less maintenance, but they cost more, so it's a trade-off. So I have older rental properties where I know there's going to be monthly maintenance. It's just what it is. Well, I looked in ChatGPT at which ones are costing me the most in monthly maintenance. And so what I'm doing is I am selling one of my rental properties. And everyone pray for me. It's supposed to close on the 20th of August. And therefore, I'll have the cash to cover not only the $5,000 shortfall, but also to pay down some of the debts that I have. So this is a good thing. I also have 4 other properties that I'm looking at selling that were also in that list. I call it my hassle list from ChatGPT. And now, ChatGPT, do not 100% rely on it, because you need to go through and look at the nuances that it may have missed. So not every property that it mentioned am I going to sell. I had to look at which ones have I had the longest, which ones have the best appreciation, and which ones are causing me the most hassle. So I'm looking at it from multiple different perspectives that maybe ChatGPT isn't looking at. It's just looking at, okay, let me crunch some numbers, which was good. It was a good first indicator. But again, don't rely on ChatGPT 100%. So what I'm trying to say is, because I bought right after COVID, I bought a lot of rental properties back in 2021. And those rental properties have skyrocketed in value. They were very inexpensive properties. Nothing like where you live, okay? Wherever you live, trust me, these were very inexpensive compared to wherever you live. However, they have gone up 100 to 200% in value over the last 6 years. And so, therefore, I am going to make a profit if I sell these properties. Just like this one that I'm selling will give me just enough cash to pay this month's expenses and pay down some of my debt, which will give me more freed up cash. So I am going to be okay. Yes, it was a bad thing that happened. However, because I'm very blessed, I'm going to land on my feet. So, but my point is, sometimes in life, you get lemons. And what you do is you make lemonade. That's what you do. So, buying rental properties is never going to be easy peasy, right? But compare it to being in the stock market, right? And I'm not saying the stock market is bad. I have some stock market investments, and I will be increasing my stock market investments as I sell rental properties and as I free up cash that I would have put into either paying down debt or into rental properties. I will be putting that excess cash in the stock market. But the difference between rental properties and the stock market is, with rental properties, you can buy on leverage. And what does that mean? That means that you can put down 20% and own 100% and control 100% of the asset. So yes, the bank loans you money, but you can't do that in the stock market. You can't buy stock. You can't spend 20% on Microsoft stock and have a bank give you the other 80% on your Microsoft stock. With a rental property, you can put down 20% or more. You could put down 50%. That's not what you have to put down. But what I'm saying is, let's just say it's a minimum of 20 to 25%. you put down, the renters pay the bank your portion of what you owe. But as the property goes up in value, that's all yours. That doesn't go to the bank. When my properties doubled in value, that didn't go to the bank. The bank still got their money from the renters, but I get to benefit from that property going up 100% or 200%. So when I go to sell these properties, the bank gets their money and I get everything that's left. And as I was looking at these hassle properties, I am going to come out ahead. And so that is what I'm talking about. Plus, I'm still keeping most of my rental properties. I'm not selling off half of my rental properties. So that's what's happening with me in the near future. But we're going to get back to whether or not you should think about buying your first rental property. So what are some of the things that you should do and that I've learned over the years about rental properties? And I'm trying to look over here at the chat. And Christiana says, it sounds like you like the emotional aspect of owning rental properties. And, you know, I was going to talk about that. There is an emotional aspect of owning rental properties. Because I was not a sophisticated rental property investor when I started, it was all emotional. I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I am more analytical now than I was at that particular time. I have learned to run my numbers better now than I did at that particular time. The book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what it talks about in the basic premise is that you should live for free, however that looks. Now, when I say that you should live for free, most people don't understand what I'm talking about. And this is how I got into my first rental property. Rich Dad, Poor Dad talks about having your rental property or your investments, your assets, which he talks about rentals and that kind of thing, should pay for your lifestyle, should pay for your liability, should pay for, let's just say, your phone bill. And then it should pay for your electric. So it starts small, and then it should pay for your car payment. So you have rental properties that pay for your bills. So let's talk about my first rental property while we're here, just so you guys have an idea of how I got started. And don't think, oh, he just had a boatload of money, and that's what you have to have a rental property, because you do not. I took this book and I said to myself, how can I lower my living expenses in a rental? So what I did was I saw a rental property here in that town I was telling you about, Virgins, that's only 1 mile square. I saw this house for sale, and it had a basement. When I walked through the house, it had a basement that had a walkout back door to the backyard, and it had this little room where they had a teenage daughter or something that would come to visit, you know, on the weekends or a couple times a month. And that is the little room that the daughter would stay in the basement. And they had stairs that went up into the main house. So I looked at that and I saw the potential. And I said to myself, if I have a little kitchenette built down here and I have a bathroom built down here, I can live down here and rent out the 3-bedroom house upstairs. And that's what I did. So I moved into the basement. Now I'm single, right? And so that's your circumstance. You have to look at your life circumstances. At the time, I'm single. I moved into that basement. I had a kitchenette built. I had a bathroom with a washer and dryer and a full bathroom and everything built down there. And then the renters, I put them, they had a washer and dryer in another part of the basement that was near the stairs that went up to their unit upstairs. So the only time they would ever come downstairs is to do their laundry. And I had the full rest of the basement. And when I rented out the 3 bedrooms upstairs, the main house, and I lived in the basement, they paid 100% of my mortgage, insurance, all of my bills. I was living 100% free. So I did that for 2 years. It was a little over 2 years that I sold that house. And if some of you know, if that's your primary residence, so one, it only cost me 3% down because it was my primary residence. So it cost me almost nothing to get into this. Then when I sold it 2 years later, I didn't have to pay any capital gains because it was my primary residence. So I didn't make a big profit, but I made a tiny profit. And I lived for free for 2 years. So that's what I'm trying to say is you do not have to have a boatload of money to get started in rental property real estate. And from there, I bought this duplex that I had for a good 18 years. But the duplex was in horrible condition, which is how I could afford it. And I said, I'm going to fix it up. All of this was emotional. None of it was running the numbers like I'm going to talk to you about now. None of it were things that I learned many, many years later. Well, look for population growth. Where are people moving to? Where is the rent to purchase ratio a good ratio? All of these different financial numbers I learned later. I also was taught different ways to put a down payment on a rental property. You do not have to have cash for a down payment. Sometimes you can use equity that you have in your other assets and use that as a down payment. Is that riskier? Absolutely. You have to know your numbers. You have to know your finances. You don't take 80% of your assets and put those down as a down payment. You might take 10% or 20%, something small that would be safe for you to do. So I'm not saying to go out and be a cowboy. I was a cowboy. I'm gonna say that because I had no other choice. I had no money, and so I took risks. That is not the way for people to do things. And I wouldn't say do that today, but I did stuff back when I didn't know any better. So today we have YouTube, we have all kinds of things so that you know better. I didn't know any better. I wasn't talking to anybody. I didn't have any counsel. I just did the best I could do. So thinking about living in the basement, adding in a bathroom and a little kitchenette, a refrigerator, a microwave, that kind of stuff, that was all I needed. See, now I'm working for the federal government, so I have a good, solid job. I have a solid 9 to 5, and I have other people paying my expenses. Well, once that happened, I was hooked emotionally. I was hooked on the Robert Kiyosaki Rich Dad, Poor Dad idea of having your assets pay for your liabilities. And so I've always had that in the back of my head all of these years. And so what I did was my rental properties now that I'm selling some off will become profitable and will start to now pay for my liabilities, which will free up my Social Security income to be invested in the stock market, which was my original plan. So a lot of people say, when I take Social Security, I won't need the Social Security, so I'll just invest it. And one reason to take it is because if you don't take it, you say, oh, well, I'll get more Social Security later. If something happens and you pass away, your family doesn't get any of that. But if I take my Social Security and invest it, let's just say in the stock market in my brokerage account, when I pass away, that Social Security money, which was invested, all goes to whomever I'm leaving the money to. And that's one of the benefits of investing your Social Security. And Christiana is saying, um, at this point in her life, it's 100% stocks for her. Um, and she's not complaining about a 20% return over the last 12 months, and it's zero involvement. And that's another thing, Christiana, is that, and I just heard this in a YouTube video. There's a difference between the stock market and rental real estate. In the stock market, you're just a passenger in the car. And that's good. That's good because somebody else is driving, you're just a passenger. With rental property real estate, you're the driver. You can sell it, you can fix it up, you have choices, you can control what kind of properties you buy, what kind of renters you put in there, whether they're Section 8 or whether you buy high-end properties and you only have A-class renters, doctors, lawyers, all of those different things you get to decide on your rental properties. So do you want to be in control or do you want to just be a passenger? And both are good. Both of them are good depending on your life and your lifestyle, which is why I am transitioning from, I'm just making up numbers here, but let's say I'm 90 to 95% real estate and 5 to 10% in the stock market. Well, I'm balancing it out by moving more into the stock market the older I get. So not that I'm selling off all of my rentals, but I want more of my income and capital gains to come from stock market investments. So I'm going to be shifting extra income towards the stock market. One of the other things that I need to mention here is because all of these things happened to me in a short amount of time, they really brought up my vulnerability in not having enough money in prudent reserves. Because I've never had this many catastrophes all happen at one time, I've been able to cover them. Well, I am going to build up, now that this has happened, I'm going to build up a more, I guess, hefty, prudent reserve going forward. So if all of these things happen in the future, I'll have $20,000 sitting to the side just in case. Had I had $20,000 sitting to the side just in case, none of this would have been a big deal. None of it. It would have just been, well, it's part of doing business, which it is. It's just part of doing business. However, every business should have prudent reserve. Now, the prudent reserve does not have to be cash. Again, cash is subject to inflation and losing value to inflation. So I'm not a big proponent of having a ton of cash. However, in a high yield savings account or CDs, you're mitigating that inflation loss. So I am looking at various different ways to have the cash available in case of an emergency, but not lose value to inflation. So you have to look at all of those different aspects. And so we are halfway through the live. We're going to get back into buying your first rental property. And so one of the things is when you're shopping for places to buy, you have to develop your own buy box. And this is something I've learned over the years, the word buy box. I didn't have a buy box. All I wanted was some place that had like a mother-in-law apartment, some place that had some extra living area, that even if I was living in the main house, I could rent out part of it, the mother-in-law apartment, to help me pay for the mortgage. So you don't have to live in the basement. You could live in the 3-bedroom top part of the house and rent out the basement. But either way, there is help in paying your expenses. And that's what I have now with my renters, is they are all paying down my mortgage every month. So they are helping me every month to pay my expenses. And normally they pay the mortgage, they pay my insurance, and they pay my property taxes and the maintenance. So those are the 4 items that you have with a rental property. If your renters can cover those 4 items, and then over time provide you extra income on top of covering those 4 items. You're now free in the rental property. Also, let me throw in, once you've paid back that down payment, whatever that is, then that rental property isn't costing you anything because you have other people paying for all the expenses of the rental property. And the rental property is going up in value. You could either pull money from the equity, or you can do like I'm doing and sell a property in the future and take away the extra money. There are taxes that need to be paid on the capital gains and the depreciation that you've taken each year. So there are tax benefits every year that you own rental properties. But you have to pay a little bit of that back, which I'm learning. Again, I ran this through ChatGPT. I gave it the numbers on the one property that I'm selling this month. And I said, how much money do I need to keep back to pay the IRS and for the depreciation that I've taken on this property? And ChatGPT gave me the answer. So I am using ChatGPT more and more for advice. Not 100%, I still have a CPA and all this will run through my CPA. However, I have an idea of how much of the profit from the sale I can spend right now, this month, to clear up all my problems that I'm having financially this month and put aside money for the IRS. Now, will I pay the IRS immediately? No. I'm going to put the money into a high yield savings account, get the interest on the money, and then pay the IRS before the money is due. See, I need for my money to work for me as hard as it possibly can. And that's the way that you should think. Always have your money working as hard as it possibly can. And so we talked about a buy box. You have to decide for yourself and your family and your lifestyle, right? Never let someone else say, this is what I'm doing in real estate and therefore you should do it. No. If you want to be passive, similar to the stock market, you could invest in what's called a real estate investment trust, a REIT. That's in the stock market, but it's also owning real estate. So you could be as passive as that. Or you could say, I want to invest with a partner. You could do that, and you could let the partner do all the work. And let's just say you bring the money, or you find the deal, you find the property, and then someone else has the money and the time to manage it, but you get a piece because you went out and did the work to find it. So there are multiple ways. But you have to decide, how do I want to invest? Now, I have small multifamilies, which is 4 units or less, down to single families. Some people want commercial properties. But again, you have to decide what works best for you. A commercial property could be a business building. It could be anything 5 units or more is considered commercial. So you could have a 5-unit apartment building. I have an 8-unit apartment building, and it's 3 different buildings. It's a duplex and 2 triplexes. So it's not all in one building. And so it's sort of a weird configuration. And when I went to have it appraised, everyone said, well, you need a commercial appraiser. See, and again, I did not know that. I just learned that. So I didn't buy it that way. I don't know. But anyway, long story short is that you have to decide what it is that you're comfortable with. Maybe you want to do the house hack, which is what I've done and which a ton of other people got into real estate investing with very little money doing the house hack. Whether you're living on one side of a duplex and you bought that as your primary residence, which you can buy up to 4 units as your primary residence with 3% down. So it's not that you have to start out with 20% down. So those are things to think about. Do you really want to share your space with other people? The older I get, the answer is no. I don't like to share my space with other people. When I was young, I was okay with that. But today, I'm just older. So think about your buy box and what makes sense for you and your family. Does it make sense for you and your family for you to buy something out of state from where you are if you live in a high cost of living area? You know, maybe it costs millions of dollars to buy a rental property where you live. But where I live, it costs $100,000. And so, and I will tell you guys, I'm sure I've told you before, but I bought a duplex some years ago for $38,000. That's unheard of. And the prices have doubled or tripled at this point. However, you know, just because I bought it at 38,000, if you bought that same duplex now, it's still going to double or triple in the future. So it's not that all the deals are gone and that these unicorn properties will never come up again. No, real estate is buy the property and wait, not wait to buy the property. That's the key in real estate. You buy the property and wait. So we talked about a buy box, right? And we've talked about emotional buying. I did emotional buying because I didn't know any better. And I was just trying to get started. I had this dream of having other people pay for my liabilities. And so don't do that. If you are now in today's world where you have YouTube videos, you have all kinds of different free learning resources, right? And one of those are rental property calculators. And I will have a number of links to rental property calculators in the description of this live. Use those calculators to make non-emotional decisions. Look at the property, say, how much am I putting down on the property? And don't put down a ton that you can't afford to invest. Put down what you're comfortable in your finances that you can invest. I had to start with nothing. So again, I started with 3% down. And then on my second rental property, after I sold that house, I bought a duplex where I was living in one half. And I let a person live for free in the other half because he was working on my duplex. He was rewiring the entire building. So for a year, I let him live there for free. Also, Vermont had a first-time home buyers program. So you might look at that as well. I bought this duplex on a first-time home buyers plan. Now, let me say, I don't know how this happened and how I was approved as a first-time home buyer, because this was actually my third property in Vermont. I had a condo, a 2-bedroom condo. I sold that. Then I bought the house where I lived in the basement. Then I sold that. Then I bought the duplex. And my realtor said, Daryl, you qualify as a first-time home buyer in Vermont. So I bought a duplex for, oh God, I don't know if it was $1,000 or $2,000 down. It's many years ago. But this was a $100,000 property at the time that I bought it. And it was in horrible condition. And I sold it, I think, for twice that much. But at $100,000, I put down $1,000 or $2,000. Where can you put down 1 or 2% and own a property that you're living in? It was unbelievable. And the interest rates were great, so it was unbelievable. I've been very blessed in my real estate investing. So I fixed up this duplex and rented it out, made a ton of real estate mistakes with it over the years, trying to rent it and manage it myself. What I learned from all that is that I am not a good manager of rental properties. I'm just not. And if you're not, don't try to self-manage. Know yourself, know your finances, and make decisions based on you, your family, and your finances, and your personality. I am not a rental property manager. So therefore, I have a management company, which makes this a little more passive and more like the stock market. Now I get to make decisions on which properties I keep or sell, or which ones I want to use as collateral to buy more rental properties. So you could think of the properties that I'm selling as flips, as long-term flips. They're not a flip where I fix it up and then sell it within 6 months. I've had these for 6 years, and I fixed them up over 6 years and had the rental income over 6 years, and now it's time to sell them for a profit. So that's where I'm at with my rental properties. And we're going to try to move along here. So the next thing, after you decide what your buy box is, and you're out there looking for things that fit your buy box, not what somebody else is investing in, not some shiny object. Everybody goes, well, Airbnbs, short-term rentals, are the new craze. Well, they were just after COVID, but now people are selling those because in a lot of places they're not as profitable as they used to be. Don't chase the shiny objects. Figure out what's best for you. When you do that, then decide on your finances. Figure out where you're going to get the down payment from. Are you going to pull equity out of your primary residence? I've not done that. I would not recommend doing that. However, some people have done that. Some people live in a very high cost of living area and they have a ton of equity in their primary residence, where they could take a piece of that equity, not the whole thing, a small piece of it, and they could pay cash for a property in Memphis, Tennessee. So yes, that strategy would work. But again, don't over leverage yourself. Know your finances. And so you never ever want to drain every penny of your finances. And I'm conservative like that. You might say, he's a cowboy, he was out there wheeling and dealing. No. I've always been conservative, and I've always had the income to cover if any mistakes happen. So the problem with what's happening to me now is too many items all happened at one time. That's what overwhelmed me. If it was one or two of these items, no problem. I can cover that. I could either cover it with rental income, or I could cover it with my teaching income, or I could cover it with my Social Security. If any small thing happened, which is normal monthly stuff, it could be covered. So make sure that if you're getting into your first rental property, that you can cover that mortgage if you have a vacancy. That you can cover that mortgage, whether it's from your 9 to 5, whether it's from dividend income from your stocks, wherever you have cash available, right? That's why you have to know your own finances. Know where all your streams of income are. Have multiple streams of income. Right now, today, my rental properties are not a stream of income. However, I have teaching as a stream of income. My pension is a stream of income. My Social Security is a stream of income. Selling a rental property is a stream of income. Always know your different streams of income so that you are aware of where can I pull cash. And I mentioned earlier that I'm going to become my own bank in the future. A lot of people, you'll hear this on YouTube, and I totally am not into this, but people talk about insurance policies and becoming your own bank. That's not me. If that's somebody else, let them do it. That's why, again, you have to know your particular finances. I'm just not an income or an insurance person. It's not. I am becoming my own bank because I found out through all this stuff that's happened that I have one retirement account at one of my 3 colleges that where I can't touch the money unless I leave the college, unless I quit that job, which I'm not planning to do for any time soon. However, I can borrow the money that I have in that retirement account, pay myself back 7.5% interest, which is similar to what the stock market would give on any average year. Not this year where it's 20% or whatever, but in an average year, the stock market is going to be up 20%. Now, if I'm paying myself back that money at 7.5%, and I could pay it all back, right? Let's just say I sold a rental property and I could pay off the whole loan. Well, then all that money is back in the stock market, just working as normal. When I pay down some of my debts, I will start to put more money in that account through my teaching income, through that college. Therefore, my bank that I could loan myself money from will grow. You have to know your own finances, and you have to have a plan to grow your finances, whether it's in the stock market, rental properties, or retirement accounts. You have to have a plan to grow your finances. My plan and my goal is to double my net worth in the next 5 years. That's a tall order. It's a big, stretch goal. However, if I'm conservative with my finances, I can do it. So that's what I'm doing. And you all know that I try to live on $900 a month of living expenses. And if I'm bringing in an average of $7,000 to $10,000 a month, that's a very low living expense. And I can invest, if I wasn't paying off debt right now, I could invest that $7,000 to $10,000 a month. If you're investing $7,000 to $10,000 a month, can you double your net worth? See, because I would need the stock market to really cooperate. It wouldn't just be me just putting cash to the side. That's not going to double my net worth. Well, Christiana, I've watched her for many years, and in 2022, she said we should all set 5-year goals. And so just watching her YouTube channel in 2022, I set 5-year goals. And I have not reached all those 5-year goals. However, I had those goals set aside. And in some areas, I've done better than the 5-year goals, but in some areas, I haven't. And one of those, as I'm starting to get to the end of this thing, and talking about knowing your numbers, is I just came out with a video of something I just learned about through ChatGPT again. I said, I want to go to Bali because Exploradora, she's in Australia. She's an Australian YouTuber. She went to Bali and she did a YouTube video, and I said, I would love to go there someday. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, what is the best first-class way to go to Bali from Florida? And they said, you want to be in the Q suite of Qatar Airlines. And I started looking it up, right? I go down these rabbit holes. These things are beautiful, right? And nothing that, I could ever sort of afford. However, I looked at the price and I said, well, if I could double my net worth, I can go. And so I just put out a video of my digital dashboard, my digital vision board, and you should all have a digital vision board of your future so that you have a goal of what you want your life to be in the future. Now, because I live on such a small percentage of my monthly income, that makes it possible for me to live my dreams and for me to spend money on the things that are important to me. Maybe travel is not important to you. Then don't spend money on it. Never compare your dreams to someone else's dreams. Do what works best, just like rental properties, do what works best for you and your family. If you're investing in the stock market, invest in things that work best for you and your family. I'm investing in the stock market. I am in one ETF called SMH. These are infrastructure, like AI infrastructure investments. So it's high reward, high loss, depending on where the stock market is going. If you can't afford to invest and risk money like that, don't do it. Stay with the basic S&P 500, of which most of my investments are in the S&P 500. I have a small percentage in this SMH ETF. So, these are the things that you have to look at if you're buying your first rental property. Think about the things that can go wrong. when you buying your first rental property? Will I be able to handle a vacancy? What will I do if some major repair comes up? I didn't know any better when I bought my first rental properties. I just went into it and said, well, I hope my 9 to 5 income can cover whatever comes up. And that's all I had was a 9 to 5 income. I did not have multiple streams of income that I have today. And always have an exit strategy. I did not have an exit strategy with my rental properties when I started buying them. I didn't think, well, I'll buy one rental property per year. I didn't have a plan. I didn't say, well, I'll keep rental properties for 5 or 6 years and then start selling a few. That was not the plan. My plan was hold on to them forever until I had the ability to go into ChatGPT, which we have now, but didn't have 20 years ago. So now ChatGPT can look over my whole portfolio for the whole time that I've owned them and give me that bird's eye view, which I would have never known. Here are the ones that are your most hassle. So I love that hassle factor ChatGPT and that bird's eye view that ChatGPT can give you. So look at your life, look at your investments. And some people don't like ChatGPT, and that's fine. But I have started to use it to my advantage in a number of different areas. Get all the data that you can. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm trying to give you a lot more to look at just to get started in looking for your first rental property, right? If you know your family's finances and you know the kind of property that you're comfortable owning, maybe it's living in a duplex and having someone else live next door, and we'll make up numbers. Let's say they first end up paying 60 to 70% of your housing costs. That's a big deal. Eventually, as rents increase over the years, they could be paying 100% of your living expenses. See, it does not have to start out perfectly, where they're paying 100% of your living expenses, like what happened to me when I was living in the basement and renting out the 3-bedroom house upstairs. Yes, they were paying 100%, but I got lucky. I didn't know any better, and I got lucky. So what I'm saying is, even if it's not a home run, your first rental property, make sure it works enough for you and realize that it's going to get better over the years. As they pay down your mortgage, your equity in the property increases, which could be used to either invest or to buy more rental properties. See, there are a number of ways that you could benefit from having someone else pay part of your expenses. Let's just say they're only paying 50% of your living expenses. Think about your paycheck and saying, what would it be like if I had 50% more of my paycheck to do with what I wanted to do, whatever that is, to pay down debts, to save up money to invest in real estate, to save up money to travel. Some people don't wait till retirement to travel. They travel while they're working. What would your life be like if you had 50% more money? So it does not have to be 100% home run. And you could do it ugly like I did, but I would hope that you would do it in a more analytical fashion. Just because we know more today than we used to know. So let me ask you this. Would you buy a property that was nice enough for you and your family to live in, or would you buy a property that was someplace that you and your family would never live in? See, some people say, well, I'm going to buy nice properties, A-class properties, B-class properties in the nicer neighborhoods because I want to buy a place that my family could live in. And other people say, this is an investment. It's not someplace I'm ever going to live, so it does not have to be up to my family standards. Again, these are things that are personal for people to decide what they're going to invest in. So think about those things and think about, are rental properties worth it? Yes, they can cut down your living expenses by 100% or 50% or 75%, or they can be a hassle like what I'm going through right now. Now, over the last 6 years, this is the first time that I've had all these things happen within 3 or 4 months' time. So this is my worst few months out of 6 years. However, over the last 6 years, I have had maintenance expenses come up, and some months have been very tight. So you have to say to yourself, am I able to work through the different events that can happen in real estate in order to get the benefits of being able to sell something or have it go up 100%, 200% over the course of 5 or 6 years? That's not always going to happen. That is not always going to happen in real estate. It's basically like the stock market. Yes, it can go up 20%. However, it can also go down 20%. The difference is, with real estate, you are always owning that asset. It is not like the stock market, where if the CEO of a company, and this is just my own personal issue with stocks, if the CEO of the company does something stupid and tanks his company's stock, that's out of my control. I can't do anything about that. If I have a property that is losing me money, like the one that I'm selling this month, I can sell it and just say, you know what, I'm done with that one property. And it cuts down a lot of my monthly maintenance expenses going forward. See, so there are other benefits that, other than just get the cash this month, it lowers my monthly maintenance benefits going forward. And the other properties that I'm selling are going to lower my monthly maintenance expenses going forward. So there is a long-term plan, not only short-term cash, but a long-term plan to what I'm doing. So I have run over by a minute or two, and I started 1 minute late. So I'm going to end this with, make sure that if you're buying your first rental property and you're shopping, that you have a buy box and that it fits your financial criteria. Do not do it based on what other people do. And everyone tries to make their rental properties sound like the best thing since sliced bread. Well, I bought in this neighborhood and I made a ton of money. That's the first way for you to lose money, is doing what they did. Follow your own financial numbers and do it analytically, not emotionally like I did before the internet came along. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and I hope that you guys have seen the mistakes that I've made and the things not to do in real estate, and just how blessed I am that I was given lemons and I'm able to make lemonade. So always remember, never let your past determine your future. Thanks, everybody. Bye.